Since the conflict between Russia and Ukraine escalated in 2022, the West has increasingly loosened its restrictions on military support to Ukraine. Initially, Western nations were hesitant to provide Ukraine with advanced military aid, but as the war progressed, this stance gradually changed. From sending tanks to approving S-16 fighter jets, the West has steadily ramped up its involvement. Yet one fundamental boundary remained intact: no Western troops would be deployed on Ukrainian soil. However, as 2024 draws to a close, new geopolitical developments are shifting this long-standing position. Could British or other European troops soon be stationed in Ukraine? If so, what role would they play? Macron's bold statement: a shift in Western thinking. In early 2024, French President Emmanuel Macron's remarks raised eyebrows across the global stage when he did not rule out the possibility of deploying French ground troops to Ukraine. While this statement was made in the context of ensuring that Russia does not win the war, it suggested that Europe might be willing to reconsider previous taboos regarding direct military involvement. Macron emphasized that the West had previously taken bold steps, lifting certain taboos, and if necessary, European nations might have to intervene militarily to safeguard European security and prevent a Russian victory. At the time, many dismissed Macron's words, but later events would make his comments far more significant. Rising geopolitical tensions and Russia's shifting alliances. A major turning point in the conflict occurred in June 2024 when Russian President Vladimir Putin made his first visit to North Korea in over 2 decades. The two leaders exchanged lavish gifts and established a mutual defense treaty that was later ratified in November. The treaty outlined an agreement of military assistance between Russia and North Korea, effectively formalizing an alliance that could impact the war in Ukraine. South Korean sources reported that the terms of the treaty mirrored the military relationship between the United States and South Korea, including provisions for mutual defense in the event of an armed invasion. However, the treaty also contained caveats. It would be subject to the UN Charter and the domestic laws of both Russia and North Korea. While these clauses may appear to provide an escape hatch in certain circumstances, the treaty raised alarms across the international community. This new alliance provided Russia with a source of manpower that it desperately needed to bolster its faltering war effort. The role of North Korean troops in the conflict. In August 2024, Ukraine launched a daring counter-offensive into Russia's Kursk region, sending shockwaves through Moscow. For the first time, Ukrainian forces were conducting ground operations on Russian soil, which deeply unsettled the Kremlin. In response, Russia turned to its new ally, North Korea, to bolster its military presence. By mid-October, South Korean intelligence reported the arrival of 1,500 North Korean troops in Russia, a number that rapidly increased over the following weeks. By November, American intelligence confirmed that up to 3,000 North Korean troops were in Russia, with reports suggesting that their numbers could grow significantly. This growing military cooperation between Russia and North Korea raised concerns within the international community. By November, Ukraine reported skirmishes with North Korean troops on Russian soil, specifically in the Kursk region. As the conflict escalated, the possibility of North Korean troops participating in direct combat in Ukraine became a real threat. Russia's struggles and North Korea's calculations. Russia's dire need for troops was evident in November 2024, when the country suffered its deadliest day of the war, losing nearly 2,000 soldiers in the attempt to reclaim the Kursk region. This staggering loss underscored Russia's struggle to sustain its military campaign, particularly as its manpower dwindled and its equipment was destroyed. With the help of North Korea's substantial military forces, Russia hoped to regain some of its strength and momentum. The question remained: would North Korea's involvement go beyond Russian territory? While the treaty between Russia and North Korea did not obligate the North Koreans to fight in Ukraine, Kim Jong-un's motives were likely driven by the desire for military experience and increased leverage in future negotiations with the United States and South Korea. Additionally, providing troops to Russia could yield military aid, including upgrades to North Korea's aging air force, missile systems, and other technological advancements. Europe's growing role and the potential deployment of troops. As the situation in Ukraine worsened, European leaders began considering a new approach to the conflict. On November 12, 2024, former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson argued that if the United States reduced its support for Ukraine, Europe would have to step in to fill the gap. Johnson warned that allowing Russia to succeed in Ukraine would represent a serious threat to Europe's security. He suggested that British troops might be deployed to Ukraine to help defend the country and to prevent further Russian expansion into Europe. This shift in European thinking comes amid broader concerns about the long-term implications of Russia's actions in Ukraine. If Russia were to achieve its objectives in Ukraine, it could lead to a more aggressive stance toward European countries, threatening NATO's collective security. In this context, European nations might find it necessary to deploy troops to Ukraine, not only to defend Ukraine, but also to ensure the broader security of the continent. The impact of the 2024 U.S. presidential election. In November 2024, the United States saw a significant shift in its political landscape with the election of Donald Trump as the 47th President of the United States. Trump's victory raised questions about the future of U.S. foreign policy, especially with regard to Ukraine. During his first term, Trump had supplied Ukraine with military aid, including Javelin anti-tank missiles, but his campaign rhetoric suggested that he would seek to negotiate a peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine. Trump's stance on Ukraine has been somewhat ambiguous. While he has expressed support for Ukraine in the past, he has also suggested that a peace agreement would involve Russia retaining control over some of the territory it has seized. This has raised concerns among Ukrainian officials, who fear that a peace agreement under Trump might force them to concede territory to Russia, especially given the country's ongoing occupation of about 20% of Ukraine. Trump's proposed strategy for Ukraine. The election of Trump has led to speculation about how his administration might handle the situation in Ukraine. One of his proposed strategies, reported by The Telegraph, suggested the creation of a demilitarized zone between Russian and Ukrainian forces. This buffer zone would stretch from the northern border of Ukraine, extending south to cover eastern Ukraine, and would serve as a means to de-escalate the conflict. Under this plan, Ukraine would be prohibited from joining NATO for 20 years, but it would receive continued weapon support from the United States and other Western nations. This proposal, still in its early stages, reflects a shift in how the United States might approach the conflict in Ukraine. Rather than sending American troops to the region, Trump's plan would rely on European nations to take a more active role in defending Ukraine. According to Trump's team, the European Union would be responsible for enforcing peace and security within the demilitarized zone, while the United States would provide weapons, training, and other support. The need for European security leadership. The growing possibility of European troops being deployed to Ukraine underscores a broader trend in Europe's approach to security. As Russia's military presence in Ukraine has grown, so too has Europe's recognition of the need to take charge of its own defense. With the United States focused on other global challenges, including China and the Middle East, European nations are increasingly aware of the need to secure their borders and ensure their own defense against Russian aggression. French President Emmanuel Macron has been a vocal advocate for greater European responsibility in security matters. He has emphasized that Europe must be prepared to take a leading role in defending its interests, especially as the geopolitical landscape continues to evolve. Macron's call for European leadership in security could become even more pressing as the situation in Ukraine reaches a critical juncture. Will European troops enter Ukraine? As we look toward 2025, the possibility of European troops being deployed to Ukraine seems increasingly likely, especially if the situation continues to deteriorate. While the United States has been the primary source of support for Ukraine, European nations are recognizing that they may need to do more to ensure Ukraine's survival and to prevent further Russian expansion. The idea of deploying European troops to Ukraine remains a contentious issue, but it is clear that the conflict is reaching a turning point. The combination of Russia's increasing reliance on North Korean forces, the growing political will in Europe to defend Ukraine, and the uncertainty surrounding the new U.S. administration has created a dynamic situation that could see Western troops on Ukrainian soil in the near future. Thanks for watching, folks. If you thought the geopolitics of Ukraine was intense, wait until you see what happens next. It's like a real-life game of Risk. Don't forget to hit that like button before Putin does. Subscribe and stay tuned for more twists and turns. Who knows, we might even have peacekeepers from Mars next.